Dan Abrams had a good piece on Mediaite today about this very issue. He said it would be a big mistake, both legally and politically, to indict former President Trump over the Stormy Daniels, quote, hush money scandal. This is what he said. He said the law that Trump allegedly violated is, quote, a misdemeanor, potentially charging the former president for an incident that occurred almost 7 years ago. It's minor stuff, falsifying business records by claiming that the $130,000 payoff to Daniels for keeping her quiet about their affair was actually legal expenses. He said now the DA may try to elevate the crime to a felony by claiming the intent to defraud included an intent to commit or conceal a second crime, and that one being a violation of New York State election law. They would argue that the payoff was done to protect the campaign and effectively became an improper donation. He said, putting aside how long ago this happened, he said, putting aside the fact that the Manhattan DA's office under a different DA examined the case in 2018 and decided not to move forward with it, putting aside the fact that the new DA, Alvin Bragg, was in office for over a year before he seemed to suddenly become interested in this old case, put aside that it would also be a really hard legal case, the effort at making it a felony would be a novel legal theory and proving that the payment was made for the purposes of protecting the campaign as opposed to, say, protecting him from his wife, Melania, finding out would be difficult. Joining us now is the president's attorney on this case, and that's Joe Tacopina is back with us. Joe, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely, Sean. And you know, when I listen to what you just said, Abrams was right in a lot of things, but there's one thing that needs to be made clear. It's not a misdemeanor. It's not a crime. You know, it's not like, oh, it's a misdemeanor and they're trying to elevate it to a felony by cobbling together a couple of misdemeanors. There's no misdemeanor. There's no crime. And that's what really makes this outrageous. I mean, by pursuing this matter, this DA's office has once again weaponized its office to influence the next presidential election. Period. End of story.
Are you convinced that these reports are real, that they are planning to go forward with an indictment of the former president?
You know, we talked about this last night. I mean, the reports are picking up steam. It seems to be something that's becoming more realistic, but I still believe somebody in that office is going to say, like they have done before, like the United States Attorney's Office has done, the federal prosecutors have done, that this is a case that is untriable. You can't win this case. It won't survive motions because there is no crime. There's no, I mean, false.
Explain exactly what you mean when you say there's no crime. What does that mean?
Nothing was done wrong. Let's put it this way. Let's start out with the basic fact that, first of all, campaign finance laws are murky to begin with, and all the underlying legal theories are untested, have never been utilized in this manner ever, Sean. Legal scholars, most legal scholars, including a lot of former members of the Federal Election Committee, have publicly stated in the past that there is no campaign law violation. Any good prosecutor knows that you can't bring a criminal case when the law is unclear because you need to show intent to commit a crime, and you can't show intent even when legal scholars agree you can't agree on what the law is. Now, here's the thing. Here's the crucial distinction. There's two in this case. First of all, let's start out with this basic fact. Donald Trump was an extortion victim, okay? When someone says, it doesn't have to be Donald Trump, when someone says, I'm going to go forward. Now, he adamantly denies this affair ever happened. I believe him. I think the evidence is clear on that. But that being said, it's regardless of whether it did or didn't happen, if someone says, you give me money or I'm going to go to the press and say these bad things about you, true or not true, it doesn't matter.
And that was said by Stormy Daniels, you're saying?
To him, and it was. And that's, you know, on the heels of the election, this happened. So Donald Trump followed his advice, his counsel's advice at the time, you know, Michael Cohen, not knowing what a really treacherous dog he was and what a perjurer and a liar he was, but followed his lawyer's advice, which is just make this go away. It's a nuisance settlement. It's, you know, nothing to him. And then she'll shut up. You know, that's what he did. He followed his lawyer's advice. He did that. And he was a victim of extortion because that is black letter law extortion when someone does that. But he paid it off just to prevent, as Michael Cohen said in his plea allocution, embarrassment to himself and his family. So the fact that it's embarrassment to himself and his family makes this not a crime, and here's what I mean.
So his own lawyer said that already? He's on record as saying that?
He pled guilty. When his lawyer pled guilty to something that wasn't even a crime, by the way, this idiot, when he pled guilty, Michael Cohen, he said that on the record. The allocution was that he did it to influence the election and to prevent embarrassment to himself and to his family. When you say that, those last words mean everything, because personal use funds, when spending money to fulfill any commitment, obligation, or expense of a person that would, here's the key word, exist irrespective of the campaign, it takes it out of the election.
So this goes to the answer. I watched you on George Stephanopoulos yesterday, and he asked you 3 questions. Did Trump authorize the payments to Stormy Daniels? 2, was the payment properly recorded? 3, was it connected to the election? And you're saying that his own lawyer, which I assume would be the prime witness in this case,
he is.
That the lawyer himself acknowledges that it was to protect against embarrassment for himself, his family?
On the record, Sean, on the record, which is why you cannot bring this case.
So then what is the law? What is the law under which they're going to bring this case? I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, well, join the party, Sean. Join the party. We're all trying to understand that. It doesn't make sense. They're going to trump up maybe some false record keeping. Unless it's tied to an election or a tax purpose or a campaign violation, you could write what you want in your own personal checkbook. You could buy a car and write, "I bought a horse," in your personal checkbook. That's not a crime. You can write whatever you want to cover it up from your brother, your sister, your wife. It doesn't matter. It's not a crime. Or you could just write, something wrong in your personal ledger. It doesn't make it a crime unless we're kicking into the, election laws here. And here, the campaign finance laws make it very clear that if something was paid and that obligation existed irrespective of the campaign, it is not a campaign law violation. Period. End of story. This was paid with his personal funds, not campaign funds. It clearly had nothing to do with anything other than protecting himself and his family and his young son, Barron, from embarrassment. And that's what makes this even more sick, to be honest with you. For 3 years, this DA's office has scoured every aspect of President Trump's personal life and business affairs going back decades in hopes of finding some legal basis, however far-fetched, novel, or convoluted, to prosecute him. Okay? These actions constitute prosecutorial misconduct. As I wrote in my letter to the Department of Investigation, I'm asking the Department of Investigation to investigate this DA and this DA's office. It's an abuse of power, and, Sean, it's purely un-American. We do not do this in this country. We never did this in this country. I mean, government officials should not be stretching laws beyond their normal meaning to get people just because they don't like these people or because they want to get a nice scalp, or in this case, because they want to influence the next presidential election. It's despicable. It shouldn't happen. Is this where we're at now? Is this really where we're at now as a country?
All right, we continue with President Trump's attorney. All these reports that there possibly in New York might be an indictment imminent against the former president as it relates to the Stormy Daniels case. Let me read. It was picked up by MSN. It originated in the Washington Post. And the headline itself is interesting, but when you get into the meat of the article, it's even more interesting. It says prosecuting Trump for Stormy Daniels' money would include hurdles, according to experts. And at one point, it says that if Bragg seeks to charge the former president, a move that appears likely based on his recent invitation for Trump to appear before the grand jury, he will face several potential hurdles, according to legal analysts. They said it would be unusual for a state prosecutor to use an alleged violation of a federal law rather than a state campaign finance law as grounds to elevate a false paperwork case from a misdemeanor to a felony. We're back to that part again. I don't want to ask you about it. But it would also be unusual to prosecute a presidential candidate for violating state as opposed to federal campaign finance laws. So that argument keeps coming up that that's what their argument is going to be, but you're arguing what?
There's no state violation either. There's no misdemeanor violation. There's no crime. He literally did. I'm telling you, Sean, there was no violation of any criminal statute, misdemeanor, felony, state, federal, statutes from, Jupiter. There's no violation of any statute. I have them all in front of me. I've studied them all myself and Susan Nicholas, who's been running lead on this case, and then speaking with the DA's office. There is nothing. There is.
Well, what are they indicating to you? Because usually there are a lot of conversations that go back and forth between DAs and defense attorneys. What are they indicating to you that they're looking the hardest at? Or what? Or is there anything else that they're looking at?
They've been very vague, and again, this is with Susan, but they've been very vague, and it all has to do with hush money payments. So it is only this. I mean, people are like, oh, it has to be something more. It has to be. No, it's not. And the funny part about this is even Mark Pomerantz, the guy who violated every ethical consideration when he was appointed prosecutor and decided to resign because they weren't prosecuting Trump, and he decided he's going to quit and instead write a book.
Is this the guy that wrote a book? Okay.
He wrote a book in violation of New York State Penal Code, okay? Because any information received from the grand jury, which he signed a document acknowledging that the information he was going to get was going to come from a grand jury investigation.
By the way, are you gonna go after him on that allegation?
Already sent a letter. That's a felony. That is what's called the grand jury secrecy laws. In other words, if you reveal information gained from a grand jury subpoena or grand jury investigation, which this is, to a third party, you've committed a felony. And he's done it because that grand jury is still sitting. It's still an open grand jury investigation. It's Alan Bragg. Alan Bragg went crazy and was complaining. Now, you know, you would think that would give him pause to even think about going forward here, but apparently not. And I hope he's not stooping to that level. But here's the thing about the Stormy Daniels hush money case. It was referred to even in this guy's book that as a zombie case because it kept coming back from the dead. He said that they trying to find any legal theory to prosecute Trump. Do you understand how sick that what I just said is? They literally, this guy wrote in his book, admitted it, which was shocking. That book was actually one of the best things that ever happened to President Trump. But he admitted in his book that they took the person and they were trying to find a crime. Not that they had information of criminality, a complaint made, and they were investigating the person because they had information about a crime. They took the person that he despised. This guy said not only did he tell his wife he wasn't going to get paid for being a special prosecutor, leaving his big job where he was getting money, he actually said, I would pay to prosecute Donald Trump. I gotta leave it there, but we're going to be watching in the days and weeks ahead for sure and following the case closely. And as things develop, we'd love to have you back on. We appreciate you joining us. Joe Tacopina, President Donald Trump's attorney on this New York issue. Thank you so much, as always, for being with us. Appreciate it. Of course, Sean. Thank you. Bye-bye.